Okay.
All right, what we're going to show you today is how to re-square your gantry to your y-axis frame in the event for some reason this is no longer square. The main thing we're going to look at here is the adjustment of these pulleys on your y-axis drive in the back. So I've intentionally put this one out of square as an example to show you how we're going to do this. And if you get a 2mm driver, you want to loosen your set screws back here. Now obviously this is locked. I'm going to hit my emergency stop, disable the motors.
We'll get to the back here, hold on.
And so I can loosen both of those set screws.
Both of the set screws down here?
Yes, and I'm also going to have a 3mm driver and loosen 3 of the 4 gantry mounting screws that mount the gantry to the truck. And I'm just going to give them like maybe a quarter turn, just enough to loosen them up a bit. I'm not going to try to loosen this one. I want one to be kind of a pivot point, because I don't want this to get too loose.
Okay.
So now you'll notice that if I hold this one side still, I can actually move the gantry a few millimeters in each direction.
And what if they have to go, let's say they have to go an inch, they should just loosen the...
Loosen all 4. If you're really far out, you might want to loosen all 4 screws, get it close to where you need it to be.
Okay.
And then get the... And then these screws, like I said, you don't want them to be really tight because you do want it to be able to slip a little bit, but you don't want it to be so loose that the gantry is shaking, because then you're not going to get a good measuring surface.
Okay.
So, all right, so we've got this close to where it needs to be. What I want to do with this first technique is we're going to reference the travel of the yoke to the rail. So I want this to be freely moving and the y-axis to be locked. So with my emergency stop engaged, I'm going to come down here and unplug my x-axis motor driver.
Okay.
Re-engage the motors. So now y-axis is locked, but x-axis is not. And I'm going to take a machinist square so that I can reference against the rail here. But if you notice, the yoke is not coming down far enough. So I'm going to, in my case, just take a piece of scrap aluminum I got from the machine shop, but you can use any rigid straight object for this. And this is just going to give me a reference point against the square.
Okay. Come down here.
So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to move this to the left, move it up against the square. Then you notice as I move...
This square is held against this linear bearing.
And as I move it over, you see there's a gap here. So that's how far this is out of square right now. So you see how the gap is changing between the yoke and the square.
Oh yeah.
So what I'm going to do, holding the square rigidly, I'm going to come over here with my driver, and I'm just going to use it kind of like a little lever and just pull it up until I just make contact. And then I'm going to snug this gently. I don't want to really tighten it yet because we're going to recheck it. So I'm going to snug that up so it doesn't move. We're going to come back and recheck. So right there you see constant gap. If you want to get really precise, you could take a feeler gauge and you could measure a gap here and a gap here and do that. For most cases, I think a visual inspection is going to be close enough for what you would need. Like as long as you can look there and you can see that it's barely touching the square, you should be just about right. All right, so now once we've verified that we are square to the frame, we'll go back and tighten the mounting screws to the truck. Like I said, you shouldn't need to tighten them much because they shouldn't be very loose to start with. So. All right, so now that that's tight, I'm going to disengage my emergency stop. I'm going to firmly tighten the one set screw, rotate it to the other set screw. Firmly tighten that one. Now I want to caution you against using a ball end driver for this because the set screws tend to strip out with a ball end driver, so make sure you use a straight, either a straight Allen wrench or a socket or a ratchet like I'm using here. Alright, so while you've got it open, it's a good idea to go ahead and check the torque on all your other set screws while you're at it. That's always a good maintenance idea. Okay, so now that we're set here, we're going to take this off. I'm going to show you.
You know, unplug, do your e-stop and plug your cable back in.
Yeah, just a second. I'm going to show them another method real quick. I'm just going to show you a fixture that we built in the shop. If you have access to something like this, you can make a dedicated squaring plate, which is what this is. We made this to just drop in, pull up against the rail, and then slide the gantry up to it. And this would be adjusted in a similar way, where I would loosen this set screw and move the pulley back and forth to get a consistent gap between the two sides, instead of moving the yoke back and forth. So that's the only difference there.
All right.
And if you have any more questions, feel free to email Davo. What's your email address, Davo?
Davo at Hyrel3D.com.